Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a naval ceasefire in the Black Sea.
The White House says Russia and Ukraine have agreed to ensure safe passage for commercial shipping and to stop military strikes in the Black Sea.
Ceasefire there between Russia and Ukraine in the Black Sea.
Тривоги, якщо знову військова активність в Чорному морі, якщо знову російські маніпуляції та погрози.
Уверен, что мы все восстановим. На это будут выделены все необходимые средства. И те люди, которые там живут.
The US announced that Ukraine and Russia have agreed to a ceasefire in the Black Sea. Yes, you heard it right. Kiev and Moscow have agreed to ensure safe navigation in the Black Sea, eliminate the use of force, and prevent the use of commercial vessels for military purposes, the White House said in two separate statements. In almost identical statements, one on Russia and one on Ukraine, the US side confirmed that both countries had agreed to develop measures to ban strikes against energy facilities. The Trump administration echoed these efforts and welcomed the cessation of 30 days of attacks on energy infrastructure, as well as peace in the Black Sea. There were also important comments from the Ukrainian side. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustam Umerov shared important assessments to clarify Kyiv's position on the Black Sea. Rustam Umerov said that the Ukrainian side considers any movement of Russian military vessels outside the eastern part of the Black Sea to be a violation of the spirit of this agreement, a violation of the commitment to ensure safe navigation in the region, and a threat to Ukraine's national security. According to Mr. Umerov, in this case, Ukraine will have the right to fully exercise its right to self-defense, so Ukraine's message was quite clear. According to Kiev, if Russian warships cross the red line, they could face an army of Neptune missiles or drones. Speaking of the Neptune missile, it is noteworthy that the US message that Ukraine and Russia have reached a ceasefire in the Black Sea came after Zelensky's advisor, Kamyshin, announced that Ukraine had used the long-range Neptune missile for the first time against a military target in occupied Crimea. As you may recall, just a day before the announcement of the deal, Zelensky's advisor reported that Ukraine had used the new cruise missile Long Neptune with a range of 1,000 kilometers against a Russian oil refinery in Crimea. According to military experts and war analysts, the Russian side was forced to accept the US-announced peace treaty in the Black Sea after such attacks intensified in and around the Crimean Peninsula. Russia is known to have accepted a peace treaty in the Black Sea for this reason. The Russian delegation confirmed that it had discussed at length with US officials the possibility of safe shipping in the Black Sea. Moscow also said it was open to restarting the 2022 agreement that allows Ukraine to send grain via the Black Sea to countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, where growing hunger threatens and high food prices are driving more people into poverty in a way that is acceptable to all. The Black Sea Grain Initiative was launched in the summer of 2022, brokered by the UN and Turkey, but Moscow stopped participating the following year, saying its demands for Russian food and fertilizer to reach the world were not being met, and the deal collapsed. Now Russia is signaling that it will allow the collapsed initiative to restart. Obviously, it is the Ukrainian aggression in and around Crimea that has pushed the Kremlin to adopt such soft policies in the Black Sea. However, it is the consequences of these attacks rather than the attacks themselves that have put Russia in the dark in the Black Sea. We are talking about what happened to the Russian Navy in the aftermath of the Ukrainian offensives in and around Crimea. The weight of these losses could be critical in determining whether the Russian leader will accept the Black Sea peace deal for the long term. We will now take a look at the deep losses of the Russian Navy that could force Putin to agree to remain virtually silent. Let's take a quick look at the naval losses in the Black Sea that pushed Putin to capitulate to Ukraine. According to the Ukrainian Navy, at least 27 of Russia's 80 warships in the Black Sea have been damaged or destroyed since early 2022. Before the invasion. About 15 ships are said to be salvageable and will undergo repairs in the spring of 2024. You may also recall that the Ukrainians recently targeted the Project C-4236 tugboat and the multi-purpose tug Fyodor Uryupin in an attack that cost Russia $500 million in damages. in which they hit 12 radar stations in Crimea. It was reported that the Russian Navy suffered further losses after these attacks. There is evidence that the tugboats were towing some of the Russian Navy's essential elements. This means that even ships assisting the Russian Navy in the Black Sea will not be able to set sail in the region. Ukraine's intentions are indeed quite clear. Kiev is opposed to Moscow turning the Black Sea into a playground for its navy to strike Ukraine. So how did the Ukrainians, who don't even have a navy, defeat the Russian Black Sea Fleet and upset Moscow's plan? In 2022, the consensus among military analysts was that Russian leader Vladimir Putin's army would most likely crush Ukrainian forces in the air, on land, and at sea. But with massive financial aid and arms flows from the US and Western countries, Ukraine has come to a standstill with Russia on land. At sea, the Ukrainians achieved greater success and launched a revolution in weapons and tactics that offers both lessons and warnings for the world's navies. When Moscow's invasion began, Ukraine's only warship was a Soviet-era frigate that had to be sunk in the Ukrainian port of Mykolaiv to prevent it falling into Russian hands. Unchallenged at sea, the Russian Navy fired ballistic missiles at Ukrainian cities, provided cover for military aircraft, blockaded Ukrainian ports, and was preparing to launch an amphibious assault on Odessa, Ukraine's largest port. However, using a series of new tactics and weapons, known as the Battle of the Black Sea, the Ukrainians have been able to thwart the Russian Navy since the beginning of the war. Russia's powerful Black Sea Fleet was forced to flee hundreds of miles to a safer harbor. This historic achievement offered a lesson in how weaker powers can use innovative thinking and new technology to defeat stronger opponents. Take, for example, the Ukrainians' first legendary success, Moscow. From the invasion that began in late February 2022, the guided missile cruiser, Moskva, which served as the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, played a key role in Russia's naval campaign against Ukraine. Its most famous action was when it captured the strategic Ukrainian naval base known as Snake Island. The ship's defense systems and its ability to operate from more than 60 miles off the Ukrainian coast make the Moskva Russia's third largest active warship, almost completely insensitive to attack. However, the Ukrainians were able to locate the Moskva through a combination of radar and intelligence information shared by the United States. A shore-based missile battery then launched 2 Ukrainian-made Neptune anti-ship missiles, which ignited their ammunition and destroyed Moscow. This was Russia's first loss of a flagship since the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905, and the largest warship sunk in battle since the Second World War. During 2022, the Ukrainians used more missiles to blow up advanced Russian anti-aircraft systems on the Crimean Peninsula and damaged 2 more Russian ships. These victories, and the Ukrainians' subsequent recapture of Snake Island, opened up shipping lanes in the western Black Sea for vital Ukrainian grain shipments to global markets. But Russian hopes that their navy would be safer on the high seas were dashed when the Ukrainians began hunting their ships with a new naval weapon. In the spring of 2022, with little outside help, the Ukrainians began designing and building the world's first combat-deployed maritime drone, known as the Magura V5. The first test of the drones was to be a night raid on the Sevastopol naval base in Russian-occupied Crimea, the heart of Russian power in the Black Sea. At 4 a.m. on October 19, 2022, 6 to 8 remotely piloted Magura naval drones entered the port and damaged the frigate Admiral Makarov, the new flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, and a minesweeper. One naval combat analyst described the first naval drone strike on a naval base as a turning point in naval strategy. Following this victory, the Ukrainians began deploying their drones more widely. In addition to USVs, Ukraine used land-based missile systems against Russian naval targets to great effect. The use of British-made Storm Shadow cruise missiles and American-supplied ATAC-MS enabled Ukraine to hit Russian fleet installations and military targets deep in Crimea. With a range of more than 250 kilometers and precision guidance, the Storm Shadow was particularly effective at hitting static targets such as naval infrastructure. HIMARS offered a high-speed strike option that could complicate the response of air defense systems. So how did Russia respond to the Ukrainian attacks? The effectiveness of these combined tactics forced a major reorganization of Russian naval assets. When the full-scale invasion began, the Russian Black Sea Fleet had 74 warships, most of them stationed in ports in Russian-occupied Crimea. In just over 2 years, Ukraine managed to sink or damage about a third of these ships. As a result, the Russians were forced to withdraw most of their fleet from Sevastopol in October 2023. The Sevastopol naval base, the cornerstone of Russian naval power in the Black Sea for centuries, has suffered significantly from Ukrainian missile and naval drone attacks. Since the 18th century, the base has been continuously developed and strengthened, serving as an important logistics hub for the Russian Navy. Its multi-purpose functions included ship maintenance and repair, force preparation and ammunition storage. The base's extensive facilities, built over generations, included dry docks capable of servicing large warships, advanced radar and communication systems, and hardened underground storage for ammunition and sensitive equipment. The degradation of these capabilities is a significant blow to Russia's ability to project power in the Black Sea and beyond. But if the Russians thought they were safe in their reserve port in remote Novorossiysk, they were mistaken. Olenigorsky Gornyak was hit in Novorossiysk in August 2023. Novocherkassk sank in Feodosia on December 26. No Crimean port is safe for Russian warships anymore, admitted Ruslan Pukov, director of the Center for Analysis of Strategies and Technologies in Moscow. Behind the reasons that have made the ports unsafe is the tactical acumen of the Ukrainians. Encouraged by the success of the Magura drones, the Ukrainians have developed longer-range maritime drones known as Sea Babies and HIMARS. These more advanced drones were used to travel about 500 miles in the Black Sea to attack Russian ships around the new base. Sea Baby drones have also been used to plant sea mines to sink 4 ships, attack the strategic Kerch Bridge linking Russia to Crimea, and carry rocket launchers to fire missiles at Russian land and sea targets. Ukraine's successes with naval drones were not only a cause for celebration in Ukraine, but also demonstrated the potential of new ideas and equipment to reshape naval warfare and the balance of military power at sea. Ukraine's successes disrupted Russian logistics and prevented the resupply of Russian troops in southern Ukraine, while limiting Russia's ability to bomb Ukrainian targets from warships armed with cruise missiles. Most importantly, it enabled Ukraine to break the blockade of the country's Black Sea ports and resume commercial shipping through a new sea corridor. As a result, Ukraine's agricultural exports are now close to pre-war levels, providing Kiev with a vital economic lifeline. It has often been suggested that a cornered and defeated Vladimir Putin might resort to extreme measures, including the use of nuclear weapons. In fact, he responded to the humiliating defeat of the Black Sea Fleet by ordering his remaining warships to quietly withdraw. This inadequate response is all the more meaningful given the symbolic importance of Crimea for the Putin regime. Russia's invasion of Ukraine first began in the spring of 2014, with the seizure of Crimea, which holds an almost mystical position in Russian national folklore as the home of the country's Black Sea Fleet. Over the past decade, the occupied Ukrainian peninsula has featured prominently in Kremlin propaganda, announcing Russia's return to great power status, and has come to symbolize Putin's claim to a personal place in Russian history. Crimea's elevated status was initially enough to make some of Ukraine's international partners wary of launching attacks on the occupied peninsula, but the Ukrainians themselves had no such concerns. Instead, they ignored the Kremlin's talk of dire consequences and began attacking Russian military targets in Crimea and along the Black Sea. More than 2 years later, these attacks have now become a routine feature of the war and are taken for granted by all sides. Indeed, the Kremlin media downplay attacks on Crimea and largely ignore the frequent sinking of Russian warships. The Russian Navy's readiness to withdraw from its so-called sanctuary ports in Crimea has made a mockery of Moscow's so-called red lines and exposed the hollowness of Putin's nuclear threats. Taking all this into account, The current situation in the Black Sea is in stark contrast to the pre-occupation period. Before February 2022, Russia's Black Sea Fleet, comprising dozens of warships, was a formidable force capable of projecting power in multiple theaters. The fleet's current defensive posture and limited operational capacity represent a significant reduction in Russia's ability to exercise naval influence beyond the immediate confines of the Black Sea. Turkey's control over the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits played an important role in shaping the naval aspect of the war. The closure of these straits to warships prevented Russia from reinforcing its Black Sea Fleet with ships from other fleets, such as the Northern or Pacific fleets. This restriction increased the impact of Ukraine's successful attacks on Russian naval assets, as Moscow could not easily replace lost or damaged ships. Ukraine's naval strategy, backed by Turkey, has created a de facto exclusion zone for Russian warships in a significant part of the Black Sea. This area, covering about 25,000 square kilometers in the northwestern part of the sea, has become too dangerous for regular Russian naval operations. The denial of access to this vast area, which Russia saw as its operational theater, demonstrated the success of Ukraine's asymmetric approach to naval warfare and its ability to seize control of maritime spaces against a nominally superior power. While focusing on offensive and defensive operations against Russian naval assets, Ukraine was also working to develop its own naval capabilities. The testing of the Turkish-built multi-purpose corvette Hetman Ivan Mazepa represented an important step in this direction. The ship was part of a broader program to modernize and expand Ukraine's naval fleet. The ADA-class corvettes, of which Hetman Ivan Mazepa is the first, are modern, versatile platforms capable of anti-surface, anti-submarine, and air defense operations. With a displacement of about 2,400 tons and equipped with advanced sensors and weapon systems, these ships will significantly enhance Ukraine's power projection and ability to protect its interests in the Black Sea. In fact, Ukraine's maritime ambitions extend beyond defense measures. Plans to expand the existing maritime transportation corridor to include the ports of Mykolaiv and Kherson face significant challenges, primarily due to the Russian-controlled Kinburn Peninsula. This narrow strip of land along the proposed route is vital to control access to the Dnipro estuary and ports beyond. The strategic importance of the Kinburn Peninsula highlights the complex relationship between land and sea control in the ongoing conflict and the need for integrated cross-domain operations in modern warfare. The security of Ukraine's existing maritime corridor is based on a multi-layered approach. Patrol boats escort civilian vessels in areas at risk from sea mines, a persistent threat increasingly used by both sides in the conflict. The spread of sea mines in the Black Sea presents long-term challenges for maritime security and will require extensive demining operations even after hostilities have ended. Air defense systems provide protection for ports and maritime corridors, creating a protective envelope for commercial vessels. Thanks to these measures, shipping volumes have stabilized in Ukraine, and Ukraine now organizes 2 convoys daily. This number has doubled compared to the previous year. In other words, Ukraine has managed to defeat the Russian Black Sea Fleet and revitalize its economy at sea. In the face of this situation, Vladimir Putin prefers to keep silent and continue the war. In short, by accepting the peace agreement announced by the United States, the Russian leader has accepted Ukrainian supremacy in Crimea and even more broadly in the Black Sea. If the Ukrainian side can continue to use its advantage in the region in the same way, perhaps as Zelensky says, the war could start in Crimea and end there. Thank you for watching.